Hello everyone, this is Bradley. Today I will talk about making such kind of procedural geometry in Blender. I have a few renders. Please forgive me about the poor coloring and the lighting, which is not my strength. But I think the idea is straightforward enough. The design essentially comes from the artist called Rik on Instagram, and there is also a person called Roger made a tutorial in Cinema 4D redshift. However, I think there is no reason that the Blender can't do this work, so I have tried providing results and sharing tutorials. Let's start. So let's briefly talk about the principle of this entire modeling. I'm going to create a torus, and then I'm going to add a simple deform. So after cranking up the values, getting kind of geometry, the rest are all done by shaders. And because we're using modifier to twist, so this is procedural, you can even copy modifier to add more rotations or so, making it kind of more interesting. Depends on what you do. But let's delete this entire torus. Here's the issue. If I'm creating a torus, and here's a lot of settings, including its segments and so on. And here's also ability to change the major radius and the minor radius. So basically the thickness of this torus. However, here comes the issue. Once I hit elsewhere, then these panels will disappear forever. There are add-ons which help solve this issue, but I'm using a native Blender, so I don't have such a functionality. So how can we actually do such a kind of things? So here's a trick. If I'm hitting tab, goes to edit mode. Normally if I hit S and scale up and down, it will just really scale up and down. There's nothing fancy, you know that. But if I'm hitting Alt S, then it will scale along normals. So these kind of interfaces which face the world origin will scale towards the world origin as well. And by doing so, you can actually change the thickness of torus while you no longer have the initial panels. So I think this is a cool part. Next thing, I'm going to create a simple deform. And I'm going to rotate that 90 degrees here. And I'm going to switch this to Z. So now we have kind of interesting things. Okay. Then later we're going to shader. So the next part is about a shader. So we add a shader. And for simplicity, I'm not going to use this principal BSDF, but certainly you can. So I need to add shader. And I need a diffuse. I also need a emission. So we can turn on the EV. And then I'm going to turn down the strength for this moment. I also need a displacement. And then put it back. So next thing we're going to do is to use noise. So the next thing that we're going to do is to take a noise, plug that, and Control T to add the texture coordinate and the mapping. And I'm going to switch the type to UV. Next thing that I'm going to do is going to combine vector. Combine X, Y, Z, and take a value. I think I'm going to change only X and Z. So make it a kind of very small number. And increase the size of Y so that you can see we have a loopings along this entire torus. And be aware that, so let's firstly take a kind of color and increase the contrast. Of course, you can also use the brightness contrast node, but I prefer using color ramp. So now we increase the contrast. And just be aware that if you decrease the Y, then the amount of looping also decreases. So you can manage all this kind of thing by yourself. It's also possible to change the noise value and the noise size, or change amount of details. It really depends on your preference. So there are many ways to change this entire thing, just for knowledge. Okay. Next thing is finally the coloring. Oh, by the way, just for knowledge, if we put these colors into the height, then nothing will occur. I mean, this is EVs. The displacement basically works in cycle to put on cycles, and you switch everything to render. But at this moment, still there's no displacement actually, because you need to hit M panels, goes to options, and turn on the displacement and the bump, or displacement only. So now we have displacement, but because this is so low subdivision, things doesn't go very well. So let's kind of add lightings. So now we have this geometry being displaced. For convenience, because I'm running a very poor laptop and I don't want to keep the cycle always, so I'm basically going to switch that to EV for previewing, and this is a very good thing. So I'm going to turn this on at this moment, and then I need to duplicate this color ramp. I'm going to make the color shift. So what I'm going to do, this is completely personal, so you don't necessarily to follow what I'm doing, but I'm going to make a kind of dark saturated blue and a kind of little bit less a little bit lighter. Then I'm going to switch that to purple and a kind of mid-tone, and also add a kind of complement color, which is kind of bright. And finally, to switch the white to a very light color. I'm also going to add a kind of desaturated blue. Set it to about mid-tone or a little bit darker. Something like that. These should be enough. So let's see our, and this is it. So be aware that if you would like to scroll this entire color, they just change this to Y vector, then it will scroll. This is one way to do that. Here's actually another way, and we're going to discuss that. We have an emission, and certainly I'm going to put this to emission. But if I put the emissions to this, then it actually means everything will emit. So now this is the case, then everything will emit, and this is not what I want. I want only part of them to emit color, which means I need to deal with anything upstream. So let's basically create a group to change this color ramp, duplicate this color ramp, and duplicate this color ramp as well, and plug that to factor, and plug to emission. And I'm going to scroll down to only a very tiny path. So I'm only going to keep a very tiny part white, and the rest of the part will be completely dark. So you can try to make it a cardinal, so it's kind of more. So now we have this color being done, and let's take that to 15. And it depends on the location you selected on this color ramp, it might not be obvious. But here's one thing that we can do. If we are changing this y vector, then everything is changing. But I want to only this ramp being scrolled on this vector. So a way I will do is I'm going to add a color scroller. I'm going to add a modulo. In other tutorial, I explained with modulo a lot, so I don't want to repeat. Basically, the idea is if I'm switching this value b as 1, then all the value will cycles between 0 and 1. So this is the principle. So now even if this value a is 2.7, it will actually be account to be roughly 0.7. And for this color ramp, it always only accepts numbers from 0 to 1. And in this case, I'm going to plug that into, and I'm going to take an add. So I'm going to add the value. And I will put the colors to the first value. And the second value is the value that we're going to switch. So if you just add this number, then our color strip is scrolling on these places. So you no longer need to really change this entire color ramp. You no longer need to change the position of this color ramp. You just scroll this number, it will be fine. So if now we turn on the cycles, you can see how it works. So roughly this is the case. Other thing I would remind you is you don't necessarily to only keep one transform. You can even try to bend. So there are many different ways. You can even use 2 or 3 simple deformers, or even more modifiers possible. But my computer is really not running well in this kind of situation, so I'll just let it go at this moment. So let's go the final case. Talk about the final thing that I would like to mention is how to make everything glows. I want to mention how to make everything glow in cycle, because it's a thing which only occurs in EV. So you need a post-compositing to make cycle glow. In that case, just firstly, you need to make sure that the strength of emission should be large enough. So 25 or something like that. And then let's firstly render a kind of image first. So now we get a noisy frames. Let's open the image editor. Image editor. So we have the render result. I'm going to add an effect called a glare. So instantaneously you can see that these streaks. Maybe this is what you want at some moments, but also the possibility is kind of ghost, not really interesting. But fog glow is something I think really good. And you can turn down the threshold so it really glows out. And this is a way to do that. If you're using denoiser, I think it's not recommended to put a denoiser downstream. But it's possible to put the denoiser upstream. And you can turn on albedo or other things. So basically that's how I do that. Let's put the denoiser data. Normal to normal, albedo to albedo. And finally try to get a render for that. Yes, I think this is pretty cool. Although I was not intended to make this looks nice anyway. But I suppose you get a kind of idea. And this tutorial essentially is done. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll probably see you next time. Bye bye.